Good morning. Page 650. Number 9. Cruelty. And where among all the preceding qualities was there any place left for kind-heartedness? How could one possibly preserve one's kindness while pushing away the hands of those who were drowning? Once you have been steeped in blood, you can only become more cruel. And anyways, cruelty, class cruelty, was praised and instilled, and you would soon lose track, probably, of just where, between bad and good, that trait lay. And when you add that kindness was ridiculed, that pity was ridiculed, that mercy was ridiculed, you'd never be able to chain all those who were drunk on blood. My nameless woman correspondent from Arbat number 15. The Arbat is the arts district in Moscow. You know, a young, hip kind of place for students. And asked me about the roots of cruelty, characteristic of certain Soviet people. Why is it that the cruelty they manifest is proportionate to the defenselessness of the person in their power? And she cites an example, which is not at all what one might regard as the main one, but which I'm going to cite here anyway. This took place in the winter of 1943-44 at the Chelyabinsk railroad station under a canopy near the baggage check room. Excuse me. It was minus 13 degrees. Beneath the shed roof was a cement floor on which was trampled sticky snow from outside. Inside the window of the baggage check room stood a woman in a padded jacket, and on the nearer side was a well-fed policeman in a tanned sheepskin coat. They were absorbed in kittenish, flirtatious conversation. Several men lay on the floor in earth-colored cotton duds and rags. Even to call them threadbare would be rank flattery. These were young fellows, emaciated, swollen, with sores on their lips. One of them, evidently in a fever, lay with bare chest on the snow, groaning. The woman telling the story approached him to ask who they were, and it turned out that one of them had served out his term in camp, another had been released for illness, but that their documents had been made out incorrectly when they were released, and as a result they could not get tickets to go home on the train, and they had no strength left to return to camp either. They were totally fagged out with diarrhea. So then the woman telling the story began to break off pieces of bread for them, and at this point the policeman broke off his jolly conversation and said to her threateningly, "What's going on, Auntie? Have you recognized your relatives? You better get out of here. They will die without your help." And so she thought to herself, after all, they'll up and haul me in just like that and put me in prison. And that was quite right. What would to stop them? And she went away. How typical all this is in our society. What she thought to herself, and how she went away, and that pitiless policeman, and that pitiless woman, in the padded jacket, and that cashier at the ticket window who refused them tickets, and that nurse who refused to take them into the city hospital, and that idiotic free employee at the camp who had made out their documents. It was a fierce and vicious life, and by this time he would not, as in Dostoevsky and Chekhov, call a prisoner an unfortunate, but, if you please, only rot. In 1938, Macadam School pupils threw stones at a column of women prisoners, as Surotseva recalls. Had our country ever known before, or does any other country know today, so many repulsive and divisive apartment and family quarrels? Every reader will be able to speak of many, and we will mention just one or two. In a communal apartment on the Dolomanovskaya street in Rostov lived Vera Krasutskaya, whose husband was arrested and perished in 1938. Her neighbor, Anna Stolberg, knew about this, and for 18 years, from 1938 to 1956, reveled in her power and tormented Krasutskaya with threats. Catching her in the kitchen or in the corridor, she would hiss at Miss K. "If I say so, you can go on living, but I only have to say the word and the Black Maria will come for you." And it was only in 1956 that Miss K decided to write a complaint to the prosecutor, and Stolberg then shut up, but they continued to live together in the same apartment. Excuse me. After the arrest of Nikolai Yakovlevich Semyonov in 1950 in the city of Lyubium, his wife, that very winter, kicked out his mother, Maria Ilyinichna Semyonova, who had been living with them. "Get out of here, you old witch. Your son is an enemy of the people." 6 years later, when her husband returned from camp, she and her grown-up daughter, Nadia, drove him out into the street at night in his underpants. Nadia was so eager to do this, she needed the space for her own husband. Excuse me, I just need a drink. And when she threw his trousers in her father's face, she shouted at him, "Get out of here, you old rat." When Semyonov's mother was kicked out of that apartment, she went to her childless daughter, Anna, in Yaroslavl. Soon the mother got on her daughter's and her son-in-law's nerves, and her son-in-law, Vasily Fedorovich Mityokin, a fireman, on his off-duty day, used to take his mother-in-law's face in the palms of his hands, hold it so tight that so she couldn't turn away from him, and amuse himself by spitting in her face till he had no spit left, trying to hit her in the eyes and mouth. And when he was really angry, he would take out his penis and shove it in the old woman's face. "Take it, suck it, and die." His wife explained his conduct to her brother when he returned. "Well, what can I do if Vasyav's drunk? What can you expect from a drunk?" And then, in order to get a new apartment, we needed a bathroom because there is no place to wash our old mother, and we certainly can't drive her out into a public bath. They began to treat her tolerably well, and when, because of her, they got a new apartment, they packed the rooms with chests and drawers and sideboards and pushed her into a cranny between the wardrobe and the wall 14 inches wide, and told her to lie there and not stick her head out. And N.Y. Semyonov himself, who was by then living with his son, took the risk, without asking his son, of bringing his mother home. The grandson came out. The grandmother sank down to her knees before him. "Vavochka, you're not going to kick me out?" And the grandson grimaced. "Oh, all right, live here until I get married." and is quite apropos to add in regard to the same granddaughter Nadia, Nadezhda Nikolaevna Topnikova, that around this time she completed the course in the historical and philological faculty of the Yaroslavl Pedagogical Institute, entered the party, and became an editor of the district newspaper in the city of Naya, in Kostroma province. She was a poetess as well, and in 1961, while she was still in Lyubim, she rationalized her conduct in verse. If you're going to fight, then really fight. Your father, give it to him in the neck. Morals. People dream them up. I don't want to hear them. In my life, I'll march ahead, solely with cold calculation. But her party organization began to demand that she normalize her relationship with her father, and she suddenly began to write to him. Overjoyed, the father replied with an all-forgiving letter, which she immediately ran to show her party organization. And when they saw it, they put a check mark opposite her name, and that was that. And since then, all he gets from her are greetings on the great May and November holiday. 7 people were involved in this tragedy, and so there you have one little droplet in our freedom. In better brought-up families, they do not chase a relative who has suffered unjustly out onto the street in his underwear, but they are ashamed of him, and they feel burdened and imposed upon his bitterly distorted world outlook. And one could go on enumerating further. One could name in addition 10. Slave psychology. That same unfortunate Babbage, in his declaration to the prosecutor, quote, I understand that wartime placed more serious obligations and duties on the organs of government than to sort out the charges against individual persons. And much else. But let us admit, if under Stalin this whole scheme of things did not just come into being on its own, and if instead he himself worked it all out for us point by point, he really was a genius. So there, in that stinking, damp world in which only executioners and the most blatant betrayers flourished, where those who remained honest became drunkards, since they had no strength of will for anything else, in which the bodies of young people were bronzed by the sun while their souls putrefied inside, in which every night the gray-green hand reached out and collared someone in order to pop him into a box. In that world, millions of women wandered about lost and blinded, whose husbands, sons, or fathers had been torn from them and dispatched to the archipelago. They were the most scared of all. They feared shiny nameplates, office doors, telephone rings, knocks on the door, the postman, the milkman, and the plumber, and everyone in whose path they stood drove them from their apartments, from their work, and from the city. Sometimes they trustingly based their hopes on the belief that a sentence without the right of correspondence was to be understood as meaning just that, and that when 10 years had passed, he would write. They stood in line outside prisons. They went distances of 50 miles and more to places where they had heard food parcels are accepted for mailing. Sometimes they themselves died before the death of their relatives in prison. Sometimes they learned the date of death only from the notification on a food parcel that had been returned, which read, addressee died in hospital. Sometimes, as in the case of Olga Chavchavadze, got to Siberia, carrying her to her husband's grave a handful of the soil of his native land. They arrived on such a mission. They arrived on such a mission only to find that no one could tell them which mound he lay under, together with 3 other corpses. Sometimes, as in the case of Selina Shuker, they kept on writing letters to be delivered by hand to some Voroshilov's or other, forgetting that Voroshilov's conscience had died long before he died himself. And these women and children who grew up, and for each one there came a time of extreme need when they absolutely had to have their father back before it was too late, but he never came. A little folded triangle of school notebook paper with crooked handwriting, red and blue pencils in turn, one after the other. In all probability, a childish hand had put aside one pencil, rested, and then taken up a new one, angular, inexperienced, tortuously written letters with breathing spaces between them, and sometimes even within words. Hello, Papa. I forgot how to write in school. Soon, in school, I forgot how to write. Soon, in school, I will go through the first winter. Come quickly. Because it's bad. We have no Papa. Mama says you are away on work or sick. And what are you waiting for? Run away from that hospital there. Olyashka ran away from hospital dressed in his shirt. Mama will sew you a new pants, and I will give you my belt all the same. The boys are all afraid of me, and Olyashka is the only one I ever beat up. He also tells the truth. He is also poor, and I once lay in fever and wanted to die along with my mother. And she did not want to, and I did not want to. Oh, my hand is numb from right. That's enough. I kiss you lots of times. Igor. 6 and 1.5 years. I already know how to write on envelopes, and before the mother comes from work, I will drop the letters in the mailbox. Manolis Glazos, in a clear and passionate speech, told Moscow writers about his comrades languishing in the prisons of Greece. I understand that I have made your hearts tremble by my passionate speech, but I did it intentionally. I would like to have your hearts ache for those languishing in imprisonment. Raise your voice for the liberation of the Greek patriots. And those well-worn foxes, of course, they raised their voices. After all, a couple of dozen prisoners were languishing in Greece, and maybe Manolis himself did not understand the shamelessness of his appeal, and maybe, too, in Greece they did not have the proverb, "Why grieve for others when there is sobbing at home?" In various parts of our country, we find a certain piece of sculpture, a plaster guard with a police dog which is straining forward in order to sink its teeth into someone. In Tashkent, there is one right in front of the NKVD school, and in Ryazan, it is like a symbol of the city, the one and only monument to be seen if you approach from the direction of Mikhailov. And we do not even shudder in revulsion. We have become accustomed to these figures, setting dogs onto people as if they were the most natural things in the world, setting the dogs onto us. Thank you for listening. Sorry.